something felt off before anyone opened their mouth. Not the chandelier, not the silver, not the way the tree filled the corner like it belonged in a magazine. It was the seating card in front of the only chair that didn't face the room. Revenge Pulse didn't walk into this one expecting a scream. It was quieter than that. A family with perfect manners can still make you feel small, and sometimes the sharpest blade is a sentence delivered like etiquette. Her name was Margot Sinclair, and the part that matters isn't what she built in private. It's what it did to her to keep shrinking for people who only felt tall when she was kneeling. This is where she begins. I noticed the chair the second I stepped into the dining room. It wasn't a bad seat in any normal house. End of the table, near the service door, close enough to hear plates clink and the staff move behind me. But in my father's house, on Christmas, it was a message. My brother Julian was in the center, exactly where my father liked him under the chandelier, framed by the tree, facing the guests like he belonged there. His fiancée, Charlotte, sat beside him with that bright, practiced smile that never slipped. Her parents were across from them, the kind of people who wore quiet money like a uniform. My mother, Judith, adjusted a napkin at her lap and didn't look up. My father, Philip Sinclair, took his seat last. He didn't rush. He never rushed. He let the room wait for him the way it had my whole life. "Margot," he began, and the way he used my name felt like a warning wrapped in velvet. "Let's not do this tonight." I didn't move. My hands stayed in my lap. Charlotte's mother glanced at me, then away, like she'd been trained not to stare at anything messy. My father lifted his glass, not to toast, just to hold it. Christmas is supposed to be peaceful, and we're all a little tired of the same situation. Julian's mouth twitched, like he was biting back laughter. He kept his eyes on his plate, polite enough to pretend. The constant need. My father continued. The handouts. The drifting. It's exhausting. My throat went tight. Not because I was surprised. Because he was doing it in front of them. In front of Charlotte's parents. In front of the future family he wanted to impress. My mother's fingers pressed into the linen. Still no eye contact. Not even a flinch. Julian finally looked up, slow and calm, like he was stepping into a role he'd rehearsed. "Dad's right. It's time you figured things out." I heard myself breathe in, shallow. My chest felt hollow, like my body had stepped back and left me alone in the chair. Philip set his glass down carefully. "So we've decided something. No more money. Margot, not 1 cent. It's time you learn the value of $1. The fork in my hand tapped the plate, a small sound, loud in that room. Revenge Pulse stayed quiet for a beat there. Not because anything was unclear, but because the table didn't react like a family table. It reacted like a boardroom that had already voted. I swallowed and kept my voice even. "Okay." Julian blinked, almost disappointed, like he'd wanted tears, like he'd wanted a scene. Charlotte's father cleared his throat softly. "Well?" He offered, and then stopped, as if he couldn't find a polite way to step between a man and the daughter he was cutting down. My father smiled at him, warm and charming. "Thank you for understanding. We're trying to protect the family." Protect. I stared at the place setting in front of me, crystal glass, folded napkin, the gold trim on the plate I'd paid for, and felt something in me settle. Not anger, not sadness, just a cold kind of clarity. If this was the story they needed to tell, then fine. I'd stop paying for it. If this chapter hit you in that familiar, quiet place, you can leave a thought in the comments when you're ready. I read them later, when the house is finally still. The room didn't rush to fill the silence after my okay. It just sat there, heavy, like everyone was waiting to see if I'd break. Julian reached for his wine glass and took a slow sip, eyes still down. When he finally looked at me, his expression was careful, almost kind. That was new. "You'll be better off," he said, voice low, meant to sound reasonable. Independence builds character. My father nodded once, approving. Exactly. Charlotte shifted in her chair. Her smile tightened, then reset. It's admirable, she offered, glancing between Julian and me. Finding your own path? Her mother murmured something about resilience. Her father focused on his napkin, folding and unfolding the edge like it needed fixing. My plate was untouched. The rosemary smell had gone sour in my nose. Judith finally looked up, just for a second. Her eyes flicked to mine, then away again. She reached for her water, hands steady. That hurt more than anything my father had said. Julian leaned back, confidence settling into him now that the decision had been announced. You've always liked doing things your own way, he added. This just formalizes it. Formalizes it. Like we were talking about paperwork. Not a person. I pressed my thumb into the linen on my lap. The fabric was thick, expensive. Everything in that room was expensive. Everything in that room was paid for. Philip cleared his throat. We don't want this to turn into drama. That almost made me laugh. Almost. I get it, I said. My voice sounded far away, even to me. You've made your point. Julian smiled then, not wide, not cruel, just satisfied. The smile of someone who thinks the board is finally clear. We noticed how no one interrupted that smile, not to soften it, not to question it. It just stayed there, unanswered, like it belonged. Charlotte's father glanced at his watch. Perhaps we should move on to dessert. My father brightened immediately. Of course. Let's not dwell. Staff stepped in, smooth and silent. Plates were lifted, new ones set down. The machine kept running. I sat there for another minute, long enough for the conversation to shift to wedding venues and guest lists, long enough to understand that this wasn't about money. It was about positioning, about making sure I didn't exist where I might complicate things. I pushed my chair back. The sound cut cleanly through the table talk. Philip frowned. Where are you going? I'm done, I said. Simple, flat. Julian raised an eyebrow. Don't be dramatic. I met his eyes then. Just once. I'm not. I walked past the tree, past the gifts stacked neatly beneath it, past the door that had always opened for me because I kept it that way. Behind me. Someone laughed softly. I didn't turn around to check who. By the time I stepped outside, the cold air felt sharp and honest against my face. I stood there for a second, breathing it in, letting the noise of the house fade. That was when I understood something had shifted, not in them, in me. The car ride back to the city felt longer than usual. I drove with both hands on the wheel, shoulders tight, radio off. My phone buzzed once in the cup holder. Then again. I didn't look. When I got upstairs, I kicked off my shoes and left them where they landed. My apartment was quiet in that way that usually feels earned. That night, it felt like a pause before something else. I poured a glass of water and leaned against the counter. My hands were shaking, just a little. Not enough for anyone to notice if they were there. Enough that I noticed. This was the part they never saw. The part after the dinners, after the smiles, after I nodded and played small so the room could stay comfortable. For years, I'd let them believe I needed help, that I drifted, that I didn't land anywhere for long. It was easier than correcting them, easier than watching the way entitlement sharpened in Julian's eyes when he thought something belonged to him by default. I'd learned early what happened when they sensed leverage. Requests turned into expectations, expectations into demands, love into math. My phone buzzed again. I picked it up this time. Julian's name filled the screen. I let it ring. We noticed how the silence around that call felt deliberate, like something being tested without words. I set the phone face down and took a slow breath. The tightness in my chest eased. Just a fraction. 7 years. That's how long I'd been careful. Careful about where money went? Careful about how success showed up, if it showed up at all. I built things quietly, structures, layers, boring words that did important work. They never asked how I lived. They just assumed. I went into the bedroom and changed out of the dress, folded it neatly, hung it back in the closet like it might be needed again. It wouldn't be. When I came back out, the phone was still dark, no missed calls from my mother, no message asking if I'd gotten home safe. I sat on the edge of the couch and finally let myself feel it. Not anger, not sadness. Resolve. I picked up the phone and scrolled past names I trusted, past friends who would have talked me down, past the version of myself that still wanted permission. I tapped a number I never used casually. The line connected after one ring. "Good evening, Ms. Sinclair." A calm voice answered. "Hi," I said. "Steady now. I need to make a change." The voice on the line stayed calm, like it always did. No hesitation, no surprise. "Can you confirm your authorization phrase?" I gave it. Slowly, clearly. There was a soft click, then the sound of typing. Not rushed, not careful, just practiced. "I'm listening." "I need to suspend distributions from the family office," I said. The words landed heavier than I expected, effective immediately. A pause, short, professional. All channels, all channels. Another click. "That includes the monthly household distributions, staff payroll advances, and automated obligations tied to the primary residence." Yes. The room felt warmer. Or maybe I was. My hand rested on the counter, fingertips numb. For clarity, the voice continued. "The current monthly distribution averages $190,000. Suspending it will interrupt all dependent flows." I understand. There it was. The point of no return. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just a sentence spoken into a quiet apartment. We noticed how steady her breathing was right then, like someone finally standing where they meant to stand. The typing stopped. "The suspension can be processed tonight. You'll receive written confirmation within the hour." "Thank you. One more thing," the voice added, almost gently. "Do you want to maintain the asset structure as is?" "Yes." "Nothing else changes." "Understood, Ms. Sinclair." The call ended without ceremony. I stayed where I was for a moment, phone still in my hand. My screen lit up with the confirmation email before I could even lock it. Subject line clean, neutral. No emotion in it at all. I opened the fridge and took out a container of leftovers I didn't remember making, ate a few bites standing up, forgot to taste it. Another email came through. This one about the Greenwich property, occupancy status, permitted residence. No action required on my end. It had always been that way. I'd just let everyone pretend otherwise. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my father. I watched it ring until it stopped. Then Julian. Then my mother. I turned the phone face down on the counter and finally sat. The couch dipped under my weight, familiar and grounding. My heart was beating fast now. Not panic. Adrenaline. I pressed my palms together and felt the warmth there. This wasn't revenge. Not really. It was alignment. When I stood up, I moved slower. Like my body had caught up to the decision before my thoughts had. Outside, the city kept going. Cars passed. A siren somewhere in the distance. Nothing had changed, except everything had. The first call came before I finished my coffee. I didn't answer it. I watched the phone vibrate across the counter. Then go still. A few seconds later, a text preview slid across the screen. My card just declined. "Is there an issue, Julian?" I took a sip and set the mug down carefully. Like the sound might matter. By mid-morning, the messages stacked up. Short ones at first. Polite, confused, then sharper. "The caterer says the payment didn't go through. Charlotte's mother is asking questions. This is not the time for games." I muted the thread. The building manager knocked around 11. He stood there holding a tablet. eyes apologetic. "Sorry to bother you," he began, shifting his weight. "We got a notice about a suspended autopay tied to the Sinclair estate. The staff there called us by mistake. That makes sense." I replied. He nodded, relieved to have somewhere to place the confusion. "Just wanted to confirm it wasn't an error on our end." It wasn't. He thanked me and left. The door closed softly behind him. We noticed how quickly the world started redirecting questions once the money stopped answering for them. The phone rang again. This time I picked it up. Philip's voice came through loud and unfiltered. "What did you do?" "Good morning," I said. "Don't do this," he snapped. "There's been a banking error. The household accounts are frozen. Payroll bounced. The mortgage payment didn't clear. That's not an error." A sharp inhale on the other end. "You need to fix it. Now." "I won't." Silence stretched. Then his tone shifted. Lower. Controlled. "You're being emotional. We'll discuss this when you calm down." "I am calm." He scoffed. "You always do this. Create problems when attention isn't on you. That's not what this is." "What is it then?" I leaned back against the counter. The apartment felt too quiet, like it was listening. "You didn't cut me off to teach me a lesson," I said. "You did it because Julian needed me gone." The pause this time was different. Not disbelief. Calculation. "That's ridiculous," he replied. "This has nothing to do with your brother." "Of course it does." Julian's voice cut in, muffled but close. "He must have been in the room. Just tell her to reverse it." "I'm handling it," Philip barked, then back to me. "There is a family money involved here." "There isn't," I said. "There never was." Another silence. Longer. Heavy. "You're lying," he whispered. "No," I answered. "I just stopped pretending." In the background, something clattered. A chair. Maybe. Someone pacing. Philip spoke again. Slower now. "You're destroying this family. I'm stepping out of it." The line went dead. I set the phone down and looked out the window. The street below was busy with people returning gifts, hauling boxes, living inside their own small urgencies. If this part feels familiar, you can leave a thought below when you have a minute. Sometimes these moments echo longer than the call itself. My phone lit up again. Julian this time. "Come talk to me." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Julian showed up that afternoon without asking. The doorman buzzed up. "Your brother's here." I paused with my hand on the kettle. "Send him up." He stood in the doorway when I opened it. Coat still on, phone in his hand like it was glued there. His hair was off, not styled the way it usually was. Small thing, I noticed it anyway. "You couldn't pick up?" he asked, stepping inside. I didn't need to. He exhaled and looked around, taking in the space. Clean, quiet, intentional. Dad's losing it. The house staff didn't get paid. The gardener quit. Charlotte's parents are asking if everything's okay. I waited. Julian turned toward me. "This has gone far enough." "Has it?" He rubbed his jaw. "You made your point." "That wasn't the point." His eyes narrowed. "Then explain it to me." I leaned against the counter. There was no inheritance, no forgotten trust, no family money. He laughed once, sharp. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking." He stared, like I'd spoken in a different language. "Then where did it all come from?" "Me." The word hung there, plain and unadorned. Julian shook his head. "You're exaggerating. I funded the distributions. I set the limits. I approved every transfer. That's not possible." "It is." His voice rose. "You don't even work in finance." "I do." I replied, "just not where you could see it." He took a step back, hand braced on the counter. "So you let Dad believe I let all of you believe," I said. "Because you don't handle equality well." His mouth opened, then closed. The confidence he'd walked in with drained out in stages. We noticed how the room changed right there. like the floor plan had shifted without moving anything. Julian spoke again, quieter. You could have told us. And then what I asked. You'd call it family money. You'd ask for more. You'd tell me I owed you. That's not fair. It's accurate. He looked down at his phone. Screen dark now. Dad says you're destroying everything. I'm telling the truth. He swallowed. You always do this. You disappear when things get hard. I met his eyes. I disappear when you decide I'm only useful as long as I'm quiet. The kettle clicked off behind me. Neither of us moved to turn it off. Julian straightened his coat. I need time. I know. He walked out without another word. I poured the water out anyway. Let it run down the sink. Let the steam lift and fade. The truth had landed. Whether they could carry it was no longer my concern. Julian came back 2 days later, this time without the coat, without the edge. He stood near the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the street like he needed the movement to keep steady. I've been thinking, he started. His voice was slower now, measured. We all said things we shouldn't have. I waited. He turned to face me. We can fix this, publicly. I'll clear it up with Charlotte's parents. Dad will apologize. We'll make a statement. A statement, I repeated. He nodded. We frame it as a misunderstanding. Stress. Holidays. You come back into the fold, into what fold our family. He hesitated, then added. The business side, too. We can formalize it. You'd have a seat. Equal footing. I watched him say the words, careful with each one, like they were fragile. Like if he chose them right, they'd work. And what changes? I asked. Besides the paperwork, Julian shifted. You'd be respected. That wasn't the question. Silence stretched between us. A car horn sounded outside. Someone laughed on the sidewalk below. He ran a hand through his hair. You know how this works. We need stability, predictability. You need access. His jaw tightened. You're twisting this. I shook my head. You don't want me back as family. He stiffened. You want me back as infrastructure. The word landed hard. He didn't argue, didn't laugh it off. He just stood there, staring at the floor like it had betrayed him. We noticed how quickly the negotiation tone dropped once the leverage was named out loud. Julian's voice came quieter. You're throwing everything away. I'm choosing what I keep. He looked up then. Really looked at me. For the first time in a long while. There was no confidence there. Just calculation trying to survive without numbers. This isn't over, he said. I know. He left without another attempt. The door closed. The apartment settled back into itself. I stayed by the window a moment longer, watching him disappear into the crowd below. Whatever he planned next wouldn't be about family. It never had been. I went back to the house 2 weeks later. The gate opened slower than I remembered. The driveway felt longer. Inside, the heat was low, just enough to keep the pipes from freezing. The air smelled faintly stale, like a place no one expected company. My father sat in the living room, coat still on, hands folded in front of him. My mother hovered near the window, adjusting the same curtain over and over. Julian stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, jaw tight. No one offered a seat. Philip spoke first. You didn't have to do it like this. I did. I answered, setting the folder on the table between us. He didn't touch it. This house is our home. It's a property, I replied, and it's being sold. Judith finally turned. Margot, please. I opened the folder. There's a 2-bedroom apartment in the city. 1 year paid. After that, you'll need to make arrangements. Julian scoffed. That's it. That's what I'm offering. Philip's voice dropped. You're humiliating your own father. We noticed how small the room felt in that moment, like the walls had moved in while everyone was talking. I'm not humiliating you, I said. I'm stepping out. Silence settled again. Heavy. Final. I picked up the folder and slid it closer to them. You have 72 hours. No one followed me to the door. When I stepped outside, the cold hit sharp and clean. I breathed it in, slow. For the first time, leaving didn't feel like loss. I drove back into the city alone. No music. Just the sound of tires on wet pavement and the heater ticking on and off. My phone stayed quiet. That felt intentional. At home. I hung my coat, washed my hands, and stood there a moment longer than necessary. The apartment felt the same. That mattered. Nothing here depended on anyone else's approval. I sat on the couch and let the day settle. Not relief exactly. More like space. The kind that lets your shoulders drop when you didn't realize they were up. For a long time. I thought wealth was something I had to hide or ration so people wouldn't take it from me. Tonight. Margot Sinclair learned it was something else entirely. It was the ability to leave without collapsing, to choose quiet over permission, to stop playing a role and keep my name. I didn't win anything. I kept myself. If this story stayed with you longer than you expected, you're welcome to leave a thought when it feels right. We'll be here, listening.